Hello and welcome back to another video. So today I'm going to be generating a random number from the number generator and drawing the character just because I can't decide what character to draw. So here I'm going to generate a number from 1 to 70. So I'm going to check the number I got in the number list, which was Keqing. So that's who I'm going to be drawing today. I'm going to be attempting to draw an IBIS paint this time, just because the last time I think I drew IBIS paint was an Ayaka while actually filming, and I did test out a few artworks after that. I finished this Collei piece and a few other sketching pieces which I haven't yet completed yet. So for the line art, I'm using colored pencil just because I think it has a similarity to the line art brush I use in Procreate. So I am doing a illustration of Keqing right now with kind of like the scroll on her eye animation she's holding. So like the ones I use in Procreate, I am using a screen size one here, which is 2730 pixels x 2048 pixels. So if you want an ad here, you get all the brushes free for 18 hours, which I like to do because it's pretty handy. So now we can get started with the artwork. I usually use a kind of dark purple bluish shade for sketching just because I can change the hue, saturation and brightness after finishing the line art, since I find it pretty handy to just change the hue, saturation and brightness to a more saturated dark purple and put it on a multiply layer. And the reason why I don't use a gray or a pure black is just because I can change the hue, saturation, brightness for a grayish color. So that's mainly the reason why I use a dark purple and not like fully a black. So I find it pretty handy to flip the canvas horizontally every now and then, just because to check the proportions and the way of the lines. Because if I don't usually do that, my proportions turn out pretty chunky. And Liquify is a nice option to use as well. So as I was sketching out the hair, I thought it was a bit wobbly, so after I liquefied it, I erased it slowly and then traced over it so that I could make it more stable. So as you can see, it's pretty wobbly and smudgy right now, so I just fixed it. I may have got a good portion of this while editing, just to make it shorter, and I actually completed this in about an hour. So with the liquify brush, it does turn out a little chunky and wobbly, as I said before. So I like to just fix it by erasing parts of them. But liquify is a nice option to just correct out the parts you want to change a bit, although it does turn out wobbly. So I had to refer to the idle animation pose while doing the scroll. When I use a black or neutral gray for shading the line art, I usually just alpha lock it and fill the layer with the color I want it, or put a clipping mask. But I find it pretty handy to change the hue, saturation, and brightness in these sliders, just because it's more accurate than manually changing it. I did want to draw Keqing for a kind of like a lot of while, so I am finally doing her, and I initially thought of actually sketching her in Procreate like I usually do, but then I thought of using or trying out IBIS Paint again, just because it's been a while since I last used it. So while I was finishing the line art, I did notice a lot of parts that were a bit off by the liquify, which I used a pretty lot in this one. So I had to correct them all, which didn't take long, but that's why I think the liquify option is the best one to use when you want to adjust a bit of any part just slightly. So I like to set the liner layer on multiply, since it just finished the coloring liner art part. So I was thinking whether to do like a more complex background, like maybe a city of blue way or something. But then I prefer a solid color, just to keep things more simpler, and I used a warmer tone this time. So I'm just putting in the rough colors of the skin here, and I am going to actually color in a layer after the eyes. I think her eyes are kind of purplish, so that's what I'm going to be doing. So I didn't fix kind of like a particular lighting scheme for this one, not a particular direction of which the lighting is coming from. So I just added shadows where I thought the lighting would come from the front. So that's a pretty simple lighting source, so it wasn't hard for me to think it up and just finish it. So for the hair, I think she has a pretty grayish dark purple. But first, I am going to just finish coloring the dress in before moving on to the hair. And just to keep the rendering and cleaning up or stretch easier, I'm adding most of the shadows and making things as sharp as I can here. But of course, the lines are still soft, which I am going to fix later on while cleaning up. And some lines are going out of the border as well. So I did change to a darker purple or lighter purple just because I couldn't decide what exactly her hair color was. So I think it's lighter than this here. And I like making the skin bleed into the hair a bit, so that's what I did, and that's what I usually do for most of my pieces because it gives more like a softer effect to the hair. And before I line art as well, I tend to make the part of the hair which bleeds through the skin a lighter shade just to make it look a lot softer. So So for the highlights, I don't tend to use a pure white, just a pale shade of the hair, which is in this case pale purple, although it does look like a white. I don't prefer using pure white or pure black here, just a shade that looks similar to it, and not gray either, since I tend to change the hue, saturation, and brightness of my artwork of the color at the end. So if it's gray, I can't actually change the hue and saturation, so I don't use grays or blacks or whites. So while I was coloring in most of the parts, especially the scroll, I found out that the brush I was using for the coloring, which is actually pen fade, I think, was actually not that opaque and was actually transparent, while I actually kept it at a 60 opacity. So while putting the base colors, I put it at full opacity, and while shading in, while on alpha lock or a clipping mask, I put a layer shade just so that it blends more well. And the main reason I don't use the blending brush much in Procreate or IBIS Paint much is because in Procreate the blending brush does work pretty well, but in other apps like say IBIS Paint, what I'm using now, the blending brush doesn't work too great. So I don't prefer using the blending brush and just manually blending it by choosing the middle color of the part I want to blend. So that's my go-to way of actually blending something. I did miss a few details on the scroll, which is actually the dark patterns on the yellow part of the upper scroll, which I did add a bit later, but not immediately, I believe. I'm liquefying the eyes a bit since I did think the eyes were out of shape. One was smaller, one was bigger, so I liquefied the bigger one to just turn smaller and the smaller one to turn bigger, just for them to look kind of equal. And then I merged in both of the line art and color layers just to finish rendering and cleaning up. So for the eyes, I didn't add much of details or anything, just basic eyes, which I usually do because I didn't really make eyes too particular or anything for that matter, unless the character is like super specific. kind of thing. So for some pieces for rendering, I didn't actually add too many shadows, just base colors, like no shading or anything. And then we later multiply, add overlay layers. I actually shaded in most of the highlights and shadows. That was I think, I don't remember whose, but I did do that once. But I realized it was not as proper, I think, if that's what you call it, as actual rendering and shadows while actually doing the art. So that's why I don't use multiply and add overlay layers or anything, I guess. So for the rendering, I used color pencil, which is the one I initially used for the line art, and liquify too, just in case I wanted to correct some parts. And I realized I didn't color something while actually doing the coloring process, so I quickly colored in that before actually continuing with the rendering. And the reason why I like to reduce the opacity of the pen fade brush is that I just like to use a brush that fades more easily, reduces, increases opacity, and has more of a rougher effect. So for the rendering part, the thing I actually do most is just recolor outlines, make lines sharper, since I often find the outlines pretty transparent and different colors kind of thing, just because I use a multiply layer on the line art. And I think I need to set it to a more darker color from next time, just to make it more like opaque, for it to just make the process of rendering shorter, I think, which I did think of doing many times. So I just erase lines out of the borders here, retrace the outline with a more appropriate color. That's what I do for rendering, nothing too complicated. And I often duplicate the layer of the coloring and the liner, just to make sure if there are any transparent lines that are coming out of the outline, I can just find it, because it becomes more opaque after you duplicate it. So that's the reason I usually duplicate it, I guess. So here I'm just darkening the background, making it more like a gradient shade. And I'm adding a kind of like blue shade to the eyes, just to like make it more unique, I guess. I think I'll just lightly wash it off with the actual shade, just for it to not shine out too much with the brown maroonish of the rest of the eye. Because I think it looks more lifeful now. So now I'm just going to show you the time lapse, the actual time lapse of me doing this. So hopefully you enjoyed this video, and bye, see you next time.